Victor Latch had everything: money, power, and influence. But his greatest weakness was one he could never buy his way out of: his impossibly thin skin. Welcome to Stories by Hawk. That's me. Short stories that range from fun to poignant, crafted for you to enjoy anytime, anywhere. Tonight's story is The Curse of Thin Skin, a billionaire's fragile descent into oblivion. Once there was a man named Victor Latch, a billionaire whose fortune was as vast as his ego was fragile. Though the world saw a towering titan of industry, Victor's critics knew the truth. His self-esteem was paper thin. Any hint of criticism, no matter how trivial, would set him off. A mocking tweet, a skeptical journalist, even a sideways glance, Victor would destroy them all. Lawsuits, smear campaigns, or simply buying and dismantling entire companies. He would stop at nothing to preserve the carefully constructed image of himself as flawless. It was a late autumn evening when Victor's chauffeured limo appeared upon a traveling circus on the outskirts of town. A gaudy display of faded tents, chipped paint, and frayed banners, it reeked of desperation. Victor sneered, but his curiosity was piqued. "Pull over," he barked at his driver. He decided to step out, surrounded by his towering security guards, not because he wanted to enjoy the show, but because he thought the spectacle would make perfect fodder for his social media feed. "Look at these clowns," he muttered to himself, snapping a picture of a juggler dropping his pins. Perfect caption. When you're as bad at life as they are at juggling, millions of likes will be incoming. As he aimed for another shot, a figure emerged from the shadows. She was an older woman, her face lined with the passage of countless years. Her hair was a tangle of silver threads, and she leaned on a gnarled cane that clicked against the dirt as she approached. Victor's security guard stepped forward immediately, blocking her path. "Stay back, ma'am," one of the security guards said gruffly. But Victor, ever eager for an opportunity to appear magnanimous, especially in front of a potential photo op, held up a hand. "It's fine," he said. "Let her through." The old woman approached, her dark, piercing eyes locked into his. She said nothing for a moment, just stared at him, as though she were staring straight through his soul. The silence stretched on, making Victor rather uncomfortable. "Well, what do you want, old woman? Money? An autograph?" He smirked, already imagining how he would tell the story later. "No," she said finally, her voice low and gravelly. "I wanted to see you up close. The man who thinks himself untouchable. The man who laughs at others' pain, yet crumbles at the faintest whisper of disapproval." Victor's smirks faltered. "Excuse me?" "You'll excuse nothing," she said, stepping closer. "You have the thinnest skin I have ever seen. In your mind, you writhe at every imagined insult. So be it. If you cannot bear the wounds of the mind, perhaps you will learn to endure them on your body." "What are you?" Victor began, but before he could finish, the woman leaned in and whispered something unintelligible in his ear. Her words were like needles, piercing the air around him, and for a moment, everything went black. When Victor blinked, she was gone. Just gone. He looked around wildly, but his guards shrugged, claiming they'd seen nothing unusual. Frustrated and unnerved, Victor stormed back to his limo, grumbling about the crazy old lady and how she ruined his night. But over the following weeks, Victor began to notice changes. It started small. His skin felt unusually dry, and even the gentlest scratch would leave bright red welts. He dismissed it as a mild allergy or maybe stress. But as time went on, things got worse. His skin became translucent, the veins beneath becoming clearly visible. The slightest bump caused bruises to blossom. grotesque and purple. Every movement hurt. Every touch burned. He called the best doctors money could buy, but none of them had answers. They ran tests, prescribed creams and medications, but nothing worked. Victor's condition worsened. His once taut skin began to flake and tear, oozing blood at the lightest pressure. In several months, he was confined to his mansion, unable to endure even the softest fabrics against his body. Every mirror in the house was covered. He couldn't bear to look at himself. His once loyal followers online began to mock him. Rumors swirled about his mysterious illness. Karma, some said. Others whispered about the old woman at the circus. Victor tried to retaliate, but his strength waned. His hands trembled too much to type, and his voice had grown weak from screaming at his staff. By the year's end, Victor was bedridden. His skin had grown so thin, it was as though it had dissolved entirely in some places, exposing raw muscle and sinew beneath. He lay in constant agony, unable to move without tearing himself further. His wealth meant nothing. The world he once dominated now ignored him. And as he lay there, shivering and whimpering, he began to wonder, what had he done to deserve this? One night, as he drifted in and out of a fitful sleep, he heard a voice, low and gravelly, yet unmistakable. You suffer now as others suffered at your hands, it said. He tried to turn his head to look for the source of the voice, but he couldn't. You thought yourself untouchable. Now every touch destroys you. This is justice, Victor Latch. The voice faded, and Victor was left alone with his pain, his fortune, and his regret. And when he finally died months later, there was no one left to mourn him. The world moved on. The circus continued its travels, the memory of the thin-skinned billionaire fading into a cautionary tale, whispered in the dark corners of its tents. And so, Victor Latch, a man who could crush empires but not his own securities, was undone not by his enemies, but by the weight of his own fragile ego, leaving behind a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest wounds are the ones we inflict on ourselves. Well, thank you for tuning in for today's short story. I'll be sharing more soon, so be sure to check back often. You can also explore more of my stories and my artwork on my website, tfhcalifornia.com. Thanks again.